Okay, it's been too long. Jeez. Alright, give me a second. Too long. It's been too long, guys. Whoever guys is. But finally back. Right now I'm just writing. I'm trying to find my notes because I have a lot written down because it's been 6 months since I last made a video. So let's talk about it. So basically, I'm gonna get started right away. And this time I actually have a timer, which means that I'll actually keep this video under a good time limit. It's not gonna be like 50 minutes long or 40 minutes long. Let me fix this camera right here. There we go. It still looks a little weird for some reason. Let me see. Yeah, it looks good. Okay. Basically, last time I talked about how I was focused on slowness, brand building, and foundational projects. Now, I'm trying to look at my notes and it hasn't synced yet from my computer to this laptop. Oh my god. One second. Sorry about that. Just skip the video for like 5 seconds or something like that. Come on. Sync this, sync. Okay, perfect. Alright, I'm probably gonna cut this because there's no point. But if I don't cut it, there you go. That's the behind the scenes right there. Let's talk about whether I followed up on those 3 things that I talked about. Slowness, brand building, foundational projects. Now, in terms of slowness, I ended up really following it for a few days, for a few weeks I think even. But then it eventually started tapering off because of this one thought that I had in my head. That thought was, I still have a project to complete, which is FAANG, which was my trading bot. And I thought, why not just finish that up? Because if I finish that shit, like at that time I was like, you're gonna be pretty much financially free. So it's more, you have more of an incentive to finish that as soon as possible than worry about being slow and all that shit. So then I stopped being slow. And that single-handedly was probably the worst thing that I could have done. Because then, we'll talk about it. Okay, we'll talk about it. Then brand building. That was also the same thing. I was like, okay, yeah, brand building is really good. Get basically express how I am as a person, but express it online so that people are able to see the virtual clothes that I have. And that ended up also falling by the wayside because I decided to say, let me do FAANG first. Let's just focus all our energies on FAANG. And then the foundational projects, which is FAANG, I called it TIBA and RPS. We'll talk about what happens to those two. That's going to come up. I talked about worries about tutoring, like getting more students. That's not even an issue anymore. Talking about being a better engineer. There's some progress on this. Okay, let's talk about now what I've done the last 6 months. 74 hours of messaging. 155 hours. 155 hours of calling. That's crazy. Most of this was with my friends. A lot of this was spent productively just talking about ideas, brainstorming, just having very, very constructive conversations, yeah. 77 hours of tutoring. Not bad at all. So this semester ended for one of my students in June. I ended up meeting with them over the summer, and I ended up getting more students in the summer. So right now I currently have 3. Okay, 13 hours of social media in 6 months. that is something that I'm pretty proud about. Most of the time when I'd be on social media, it would just be just browsing on my phone, just opening up Instagram, opening up Snapchat for like 2 seconds, probably spending like 5 minutes there and then backing out. The main time I spend on social media is watching YouTube, but that's not really social media. So we'll talk about this. So at that time, Clubhouse used to be big. I remember talking about like the absolute insane potential that it had. And if I were to just compare the number of active users that were at that time, that existed at that time, even though there's Android functionality now, there's nowhere near the amount of friends that I have that are online then versus now. In fact, I don't even use it anymore, just because I'm like my it's in the works, right? It's just that my focus is somewhere else right now, but it's in the works. It's coming. It's been placed in a later sprint. So the main thing you gotta know, though, which we'll talk about, right? This is gonna be the first of the big things that I'm gonna be talking about, which is that I started trading like crazy, like so crazy. All of March, late April, early May. 335 hours. That's the most. For anything I'm about to say right now, that's the most I've ever spent. Think about 335 hours, how long that is. There's only 24 hours in a day, right? 8 of those days you spend working, let's say. That is equivalent to 40 work days, 40 something work days. Just trading 24/7, right? So I ended up finishing Fab, like in terms of like what I really wanted to finish. I ended up finishing it, which took 48 hours of design work, including some other stuff, because design wasn't all just Fab. It had to do like systems and stuff, and 265 hours of project. That was all Fab. Some of it was RPS, some of it was Tiva. But that was good. Like the one thing that I could say is that I finally created the screener that I was talking about, and it works beautifully. I love it. Like it's so unbelievable that I was able to, convert that thought into reality. We'll talk about that. Then I finally graduated. That's another update. I am finally a graduate of industrial engineering at Ryerson University. In fact, here's my iron ring, and oops. Here's my degree. I put it in like a really, really non-bendable container so that we can see it. Oh, you can see it. There you go. That's my degree right there. Okay. Let's put that back. Oops. Ooh. Whoa. There we go. Okay. So that happened. This just like, it's so interesting when you wear this, you feel like almost like a different person. It's so interesting how like our identities work, especially with what we wear, right? It's something so small too, and it makes a huge difference. Anyways, finally graduated. Okay, we'll talk about why this all happened, but I'm just about to give you the stats. I watched 31 movies. That's an average of 5 movies a month. And if you know me, like, I don't watch movies at all, right? I binge watched one entire TV show during this time. I've watched 169 hours of YouTube. That's equivalent to 80 something movies, assuming each movie is 2 hours long. So that's like 90 something movies, probably almost 100 movies worth of YouTube videos. And that was 600 plus videos. I listened to 78 hours worth of podcasts, and 1/3 of it was Joe Rogan. Like 1/8 of it, I don't remember. Like, but mainly it was Joe Rogan. I went to 2 cottages, one with friends, one with family. Bought a PS4, played for 2 weeks straight, then sold it. So that was 73 hours. If you divide that into 2 weeks, it's an average of 5 and something hours each day. Did a lot of strategic planning, work on my co-op. That was 80 hours, which took a long time. So we'll talk about this. Had a paradigm shift, 56 hours of contemplation. And then finally, I changed my end of 2021 plan. so that's what's happened since. Now let's actually get into the details. We're 10 minutes in, or 9 something minutes in. Now, I'm not going to talk about trading a lot. There's only two main things that's worth talking about. Number one is I got unbelievably desensitized to the amount of money I was making. I don't even know if it's wise to talk about how much I made. I'm just trying to think about like the repercussions in the future, the fact it's going to be public and going to be out there forever. But it doesn't really matter because I lost it all. So basically, I ended up getting so desensitized. I was making like thousands of dollars and I wouldn't feel a thing. And that was like so interesting because when I look at it now, because I haven't traded in months, I'm like, whoa, $1,000, that's a lot of money, especially making it in a day. Yeah, like what's interesting is 335 hours just poof, gone. And guess what? If I summed up all the time I spent trading, all of it has just gone poof every time. Because what ended up happening is I ended up losing all the money that I had in my trading accounts, which was at that time all my money when I put it in. Which is just unbelievable because I've been making, this is the second part, I've been making the same mistake for 4 years in a row. If I had kept every penny that I had invested into crypto, because this is what I was doing, I was trading crypto at that time. If I had kept every penny I invested into crypto, and I just put into Bitcoin, or I put into Ethereum, or put into whatever, it doesn't matter. If I just put it into Bitcoin, and I never touched anything, my money over like cumulatively, like at those exact times that I deposited it, would have turned into $500,000. That is just unbelievable to me. I look at that, I'm like, what the fuck? You know? So considering that out of that potential $500,000, I have zero relative to that. Obviously I don't have zero money, but I have zero relative to that. I'm like, it just forced me to just try to understand why I was doing what I was doing. And I ended up concluding that I thought I was a genius. And the same conclusion was made with FAAB, which we'll talk about why that ended up taking a lot longer than expected. The overall lesson that I got this year in terms of FAAB, as well as in terms of trading, was that intuition is the door to delusion. That's the insight that I got. Now, I'm not saying that's true 100% of the time, I'm just saying that that's my experience. Intuition with trading led to hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds, I think almost 1,000 hours. Yeah, definitely over 1,000 hours worth of just wasted time and money lost. And the same happened with FAAB, and we'll talk about that. So I ended up just realizing that. Like I did some contemplating, I just thought about it, and it happened so quickly. Like the moment I decided after 4 years to just think about it, why I was doing what I was doing, I ended up realizing that. So insane. Like, and I started valuing just being in touch with exactly what's going on here and being more self-aware because of that. So then, yeah, school was just an absolute W. After I came back from my year off in 2019. So I left in 2018, came back 2019. Every semester after that, I got like 4.0s. And the final semester, I just absolutely killed it. And my GPA went from like a 3.1 from the time I came back. So my beginning of my third year was a 3.1, and it went all the way up to a 3.6, which is unbelievable. So I pretty much got distinction because of that. You probably saw it actually in my certificate. So that was school. I ended up spending only like 30 hours on school that entire 35 hours, yeah, on that entire semester. Think about that, because I only had one course, my capstone. Then comes FAAB. Let's talk about FAAB. The first thing I have to say is that I'm 100% happy with the result. I ended up doing the following. I ended up creating a screener that was able to scan my method, my strategy, through, let's say, 100 different stocks or cryptos, or let's say coins. And what it would do is they would see whether it follows it. Now, it's not just 100 coins and that's it across only one time frame. It's across multiple different time frames. So it's sending over 1,000 requests in a single second, or in a minute, sorry. 1,000 requests in a single minute. And it's all done asynchronously, and then it returns a table of the results. And it's so interesting because I get it within like 3 seconds. The entire thing happens. Actually, yeah, it's 1,000 something requests in like a few seconds. There's a rate limit for like 1,200 requests per minute, and that's why I got confused. But within 3 seconds, it comes back and it puts it all on the table, formatted and sorted by the highest risk reward ratio. And that's exactly what was in my mind. Nothing like this exists from what I know. I've tried to go on all types of exchanges, all types of websites like FinViz, TradingView. None of them have a way of crafting a strategy and then creating a screener that scans across multiple time frames which one's the best one. And then to add to that, I ended up doing back testing on like 100 million data points to figure out which of those signals now, because now there's a bunch of signals that come up, which of those signals are the best. And I just look at historic data, come up with a bunch of metrics such as unrealized risk reward ratio, win-loss percentage, largest profit, largest unrealized loss, all this stuff. And I would put them all down, number of candles till you get to the peak unrealized profit, right? Like I would write all this stuff. I would have all these metrics in the columns, and I would be able to now I can run some machine learning algorithm to figure out which one's the best one. And now I can back test. Now there's an abstraction that's being done. Now I can back test not on a specific asset, but I can back test screeners, back test optimization techniques. Because essentially what I could do is I can now create an optimization technique of exiting one position and then going into another one, or ranking certain things over others to buy. Let's assume I'm buying 5 coins. I'm going to pick the top 5 in terms of the highest risk reward ratio in that exact minute. And then as new ones come, they're going to keep replacing them. But I can back test those optimization strategies now, which is unbelievable. Like I haven't gone nowhere close to doing any of this stuff because it requires a lot of infrastructure. But the thing I was hoping to accomplish was, after I created this, I was hoping to have some clear understanding of whether my rules actually worked. So then what I created in the meantime was that I created something called a testing intuition test, or intuition test. Essentially what I would do is I would automatically draft the graph of a chart, the chart of a symbol right before a signal is about to be given. So the signal has been given, but no results have been given after that. So it's almost as if it's live, that it's almost as if they say buy, and you don't know what happens after that. Or I should write it this way, because the camera's that way. You don't know what happens after that. Now what you have to do is say yes, this trade's going to be profitable, or no, this trade's not going to be profitable. And basically what I was doing is I was testing my intuition to see if my rules actually worked. I did a bunch of statistical tests, and I just realized at the end of it that I was nowhere near as profitable as I thought I would be. I was still profitable, and here's the other problem I realized, which was a small amount of trades were responsible for most of my profits, which was quite discouraging, because it just showed me that most of the trades I'm going to make are losers, and if you miss even one opportunity, you're fucked. That means you can have a losing year. And that made me realize that there's a lot of noise in the system. And so I tried to figure out what type of distribution are these trades in, are these methods in. I realized all of them I thought they were all going to be normal distributions like a bell curve, so that I would know, for example, that the average trade on this symbol at this time frame would make 7% whenever this rule happens. But I realized that it's not a normal distribution where it's like a medium of 7%, mean of 7%, and then it starts tapering off on either side. I realized it's instead exponential, or even a power law distribution where most of your trades are losers, and then a lot of them are very, very big winners, where the x-axis represents the profitability per trade, and the y-axis represents the frequency. It was like a histogram, and that's what I realized. So those two things. My intuition is nowhere near as good as it was. As you can see, intuition is the door of delusion. And the second was, I assumed a normal distribution, which I thought it was inevitable for me to make money. So then I realized if it's exponential, a lot of trades are going to be lost. It's not very good. So then that sort of discouraged me. I do have to add though, I added a lot of pressure to myself to finish creating that screener near the end of April. I made like a promise to myself that like if I'm able to like finish by April, it's able to like run by itself, then I'm gonna go travel or something. But then during that month, I ended up losing all my money, and I also ended up like pressuring myself so much that when I ended up losing all my money, I just stopped doing like working altogether. And this is when I entered this no motivation phase. It was like a vicious cycle for like 2 months. Binged on movies, TV shows, YouTube videos. I couldn't stop sleeping. Like I just couldn't do anything. I'm being 100% serious. I was chilling. I couldn't even bring myself to do anything. And what I basically realized was the reason why I couldn't bring myself to do anything was because I was forcing myself to finish fab whenever I would actually go and try to do something productive. I would say, no, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do this. I'm going to first finish fab because that has the highest leverage right now. And that resistance that I had towards fab stopped me from doing anything productive. And so I spent 2 months, May and June, just completely fucked. Gaming, I got a fucking PS4. I was talking to my friends so much during that time, as you saw, like 100 and something hours. I guess it wasn't as productive. But basically, I was calling my friends so much that they pretty much convinced me to get a PS4. And I ended up getting one. And I basically was like playing every single day for 2 weeks straight. I was playing Warzone and Fortnite. And that shit was a wild experience. I was so addicted. I never felt so excited too when I first started that shit. It was so fun. It made me wonder, like, what am I missing out on in life to feel that exhilaration, you know? But then, as you saw, like the crash. Well, actually, sorry, you didn't see it, but as I saw, the crash was crazy because I ended up just binging too hard. Like even my friends were like, "What the hell is wrong with you? Can you not stop? You don't have self-control?" Because my friends would literally play with, like, when all of us were playing. But I would keep playing outside because I would just want to be really good at the game. And then I went to the cottage with my friends. This was a really, really good experience because although all that was fun, whatever, yeah, that happened, I ended up coming back and I was way more reflective. Previously, I had also listened to a lot of podcasts during that time of a guy named Kapil Gupta. Kapil Gupta. If you want to look into this guy, look into him, because it will allow you to understand what I'm about to say next with much more clarity than if I were to explain it myself. Basically, what I did after I came back from the cottage, I'll come back to this Kapil Gupta guy after. When I came back from the cottage, I just thought about it. I was just thinking about what the hell I was doing in my life. And so this is where the Kapil Gupta guy comes in, actually. He was just talking about his main, like, the main thing that he just talks about is how most people are very insincere. And because they're insincere, they ask for how to do things when they don't actually want to do it. They complain about things happening to them when they don't actually want to get out of those situations. So this insincerity breeds delusion, basically. And he says that having some type of clarity on your life is the only way to be motivated. So another way to phrase this is having an understanding of why things happen will give you clarity as to what to do next. And it's actually a very simple concept. It's like any problem you've wanted to solve, and this is me interpreting it, obviously, like any problem you've ever wanted to solve, whether there's like a leak in your ceiling, whether your computer stops working, whether this camera all of a sudden just shuts off. In order to solve the problem, you have to collect data. You have to look at the source of the problem. You have to look at what caused it to happen. And this had a profound effect on me after I came back to the cottage, because it was just, the exposure was there, like these concepts were there. And so I just decided to think about them, and it just hit me. Like, this is where I reached this paradigm shift. And we'll talk about the paradigm shift a little later, but essentially all you have to know is that there's two things. which is sincerity and understanding. And the ultimate thing is, most of your delusions and suffering comes from a lack of understanding. And the reason why you have a lack of understanding is because you also have a lack of sincerity. And the only way to get sincerity is to have a previous understanding. So it's a chicken or egg problem. And you're pretty much in this like weird state where you really don't actually know, you don't actually know if you're ever going to get to a point of true sincerity. But it did hit me though. So what I did was I reached that previous understanding by being exposed to him. Then I started getting sincerity to try to understand. We'll talk about this later. That's what he talked about. But effectively what that did was that it just made me realize, it made me ask myself, how do I actually get to this ultimate understanding? How do I optimize for it? And one of the things was to let go of my PS4. And it was just so natural at that point that that very night that I came back from the cottage, after I started reflecting, I ended up putting my PS4 on Facebook Marketplace and sold it the next day. And I even sold it at like a deficit, even though I bought it 2 weeks before. I could have sold it at the same price. And I just did it because I wanted to get rid of it. So then, after that, man, it's only been like 2 months, by the way. And by the way, just as a side note, it's been like 25 minutes, 26 minutes. I'm predicting that I'm gonna be another, let's say, I want to like test myself. I'm predicting I'm gonna be another 15 minutes, so 40 minutes. That's how long the video is gonna be. Okay. So eventually, what ended up happening was that I ended up reestablishing all of my systems because I wanted to. Essentially, when I was doing Fab, I started like not sleeping properly, not eating properly. All the habits that I had before, such as like working out, having posture exercises, or like I don't even know. Like there's so many freaking systems. Like any type of inspecting or sorting or doing some type of cleaning. All of that went away. I stopped doing any of that shit, and this time I had a completely different paradigm shift. I had a completely different idea and approach to everything. One of the things that I realized was that these systems that I'm doing were really naive. I started just realizing that there's no reason to ever do anything that you don't want to do. That sounds really, really interesting. Immediately, for some people, they might think, well, no, you must have discipline. You must pull through. you must endure, right? But the only reason why you endure is because you have this future goal that's very positive. That makes you feel good. That's the only reason why you're enduring what you're feeling now. So no one actually wants to feel bad. That's what I realized, right? Like even if you're trying to do it for another purpose of going to the gym, like suffering just to get bigger, like you're not suffering for no reason. You're suffering for a reason that makes you feel good. That's what I like essentially just ended up concluding, because I had this previous mentality of what I just explained before about like the growth mindset. But what I just have come to this deduction that you should never do anything that you don't want to do, because if you actually wanted to do it, then you would do it. There is no one forcing you to brush your teeth. Nothing forcing you. You do it. Nothing forces you to take showers. Except for some people. I can actually personally attest to this. I had like huge problems, very big negative associations to like shower when I was a kid. So I would usually delay showering for some reason until I lived on my own, until I ended up becoming more independent as I was like in high school, university, and I started realizing like, oh shit, like I'm getting dirty. So like there's nothing forcing you to go on your phone, right? Like there's nothing forcing you to go eat. You do it because you want to. And similarly, there's nothing forcing me to go in front of this camera. Some people are like, oh, I can't make a video, I didn't make a video for 6 months because I didn't feel like it, and now I feel like it. And if I didn't feel like it before, It was only because I didn't understand something in the past that caused me not to do so. It's as simple as that. It's so simple. If you don't understand what I just said, then watch some videos from Kapil Gupta, then it will make sense, probably. It might not still. And I don't even expect this to make any sense. I'm not trying to teach you anything. I'm just trying to explain to you what's been going on. So, as a result, I just realized half of my systems are garbage because half of them were rule-based. I think I talked about challenges, about sacrificing, jeopardizing something in order to pull through. And I just discarded that immediately. I was like, this is not useful. RPS, very similar wavelength on challenges, and I discarded that as well. It was so easy. I was like, RPS isn't very useful. You shouldn't want to do anything that you don't want to. And by the way, I'm not following that as a rule. It was just an understanding that it's not useful, and so I didn't do it. Same with like waking up or sleeping or focusing. Like these things you can't force yourself to do. You can only do them when you want to. If you can't force yourself to sleep at a specific time. You can't force yourself to wake up at a specific time unless there's resistance. That's essentially the key. There's a lot of huge things that come with resistance, but I'm not going to talk about it in this video because I still have uncollected thoughts about it that I'm recently experiencing. But that's essentially what I ended up doing. Getting all my habits back, getting all my systems back. Then when I ended up reestablishing my systems, then I'm like, okay, what do I do now? What's my next objective? And I was like, okay, in order to determine my next objective, let's focus on what the point is now. And then I thought about it and I was like, and just immediately what came to me was, I need to optimize for my understanding. Because the only thing we really want out of life is a way out of suffering. Suffering is very loose. What I mean by suffering is very loose. It's our association to all types of emotions like shame, guilt, anxiety, anger, like all types of this stuff. All types of like bad emotions. And what I basically ended up realizing was that I have to optimize for my understanding. What does that mean? That means spend more time contemplating. This is just the conclusions that I've come to. I'm not saying that this is the way in which you achieve higher understanding. I understand contemplation is a completely different thing than other people understand it. So if you ever think that contemplation helps, it's not going to help you. I mean something very specific, right? That the words can't convey when I talk about contemplation. So doing that was one thing. Meeting people was another huge thing. Getting out of survival so you have time to understand was another huge thing. Actually being like trying to understand your experience, trying to understand yourself is another huge thing. And all that could be done experientially, just by like observing yourself. Now, one of the most glaring things to achieve a higher understanding is to get out of survival. What I mean by survival is getting out of the rat race, becoming financially free, not needing to have a conflict of interest in terms of money or in terms of status or in terms of wealth. You don't ever have to having no conflict of interest, getting out of survival, being financially free. All of this means you don't ever have to think, oh, I should talk to this guy because he's going to be useful to me in the future so I can get a job, or I can do that or do that, or oh, I should do this because it's going to be good on my resume, or I should do this because I want to get paid. Like this is all something that I don't want to even be pulled towards. So my current understanding, as it is that I want to get out of survival as fast as possible, so that the pond is pure. It's not going to be infested with this pull of a conflict of interest. And so, the conclusion of this video essentially was, in order to get out of survival, I then thought of the highest leverage thing to get out of survival. And for me, so this is how I thought about it. And this is so interesting. This is the beauty of understanding, of how understanding works. what I ended up understanding was that in order to be successful, you have to essentially beat human nature. What I mean by that is you have to, one of the big ways of doing this is you have to be able to envision a future that somebody else cannot see, or you're able to envision a current problem that somebody else does not know about or does not know how to implement, and that you do. In both of these, the future makes you more money because there's less people doing it. The present, there's obviously problems at the moment that people are most likely working on. I'm talking about problems that people don't even know that they have yet. But essentially having an accurate vision of the future. Having an accurate vision of the future, very, very accurate. Being able to understand the world enough so that you know where all the billiard balls are moving, where they're going to land, and essentially positioning yourself accordingly. And that can only be done by increasing your understanding of the world. And that is unbelievable to me, that in order to make money, like a lot of money, to get out of, like, to become financially free, that it's back to understanding. Then the next thing is executing on it, having the ability to execute. And most of this is just an engineering effort. Most of this is just a human acquisition effort. Resource acquisition effort. What I meant by human acquisition was employees. But then that comes the third thing, which is the hardest thing, which is how do you actually convince people to buy into your vision? Which is your employees, which is your consumers, and it's your investors, or even incubators. And so I thought about this, I thought about it, I came up with a list of reasons. And all of those reasons could only start, such as like create like a brand, a company brand, start posting on leveraging personal other platforms like Hacker News, Product Hunt, YouTube, Facebook, all these places, and posting your product whenever you make it or your startup. These are all things that you can only do once you actually start your product and when you actually know what your product is. But then I realized there's certain things that you can do when you don't even have a product yet that can make you massively successful in the meantime. It just builds potential if you think about it. And the three things are building your own personal brand and leveraging it whenever the new product comes. Leveraging credibility as a founder or as a person as a founder of the product. And the third thing is to meet people. Now, I mentioned meeting people before. That linked to understanding. Now this also links to getting out of survival as well. And so meeting people became such a hugely important thing. The label part, I was like, there's a reason why investors invest in people that have went to Facebook, Google, and all these places. There's a reason why Y Combinator accepts people that are from FAANG. There's a reason why people just have more credibility as a founder and that want to work for people that have went to these big lofty places, And so I just realized that even though I don't necessarily want to, there's just so much leverage in working at a FAANG company. And so my current objective at the moment to achieve a high amount of leverage is to work at a FAANG company. Why? And it solves so many problems. Not just the credibility aspect of things. Let's put that to the side. The insanely high compensation gets you out of survival much, much quicker. You can invest your money somewhere else, or you can put that money that you have saved up into your business, start the cash flow, multiply quicker, right? The third thing is that it's literally a jump pad of exposure. When I was talking about understanding, one of the other factors that I mentioned was exploring. Experiencing things that you've never experienced before. Whether that be people, food, places, anything. And so exposure was one of them. It's a jump pad of exposure of those things. You get to meet very, very smart people. You get to meet very, very wise people. You get to find partners there. You get to find investors there. And just thinking about that made me realize that in terms of what to do first, this is the number one thing I should be doing. And then after that, whatever else that I want to be doing, I should be doing. I sort of thought of it like, I have to do this similarly to how someone's like, in order to be a doctor, I have to go to school. But it's not like I don't want to do this. This is going to be really, really interesting. Meeting the people that are there. Like getting to know the tech that's used at scale. My plan to get there with no experience. So I have to reiterate this. I have no job experience. I just graduated from university. I've had no co-ops. I'm not in a computer science program, but yet I still think I can get into the top 30 companies in about by the end of the year, let's say. And the reason why is because this time, instead of the way in which I did it during my internship search, I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to understand things from first principles. I'm going to think big picture. I'm going to be meeting people not all at once during a specific period of time and sound all desperate. I'm going to be meeting people just for the sake of my own curiosity, and if those end up developing into actual relationships, which I can eventually get a referral from, then that's great. It's a very, very long-term plan that, if executed, I don't ever have to prepare for another job interview again, because I'll either know so many people. I'll never have to. Okay, two things. I'll never have to ever apply online again because I'll know so many people, and I'll never have to prepare for another job interview again because I'll already have the technical foundations. Once you have the foundations of something, you don't forget it. So at that time, I'll also have enough experience making all my projects end to end that I'll be able to be confident during the on-site as well. So that's pretty much it. The plan now is to learn, network, and grind. That's where I'm at. You might have noticed that maybe I didn't show it this way, but you might have noticed that I'm a little more serious with how I'm approaching things in life. Before my previous videos, I was a little more. I used to laugh a lot more. Like, not saying that I'm not going to. It's just I was really living more during that time, and that's fine. The problem is that I was living on a derived sense of happiness. What I mean by this is I was still suffering during that time. And so the logical conclusion in my head is, why do you try to enjoy when you haven't figured out a way out of suffering yet? A way to actually experience long-lasting happiness. You might also notice that I keep on saying a way out of suffering. And you're like, oh, this guy's so impacted by suffering, because I get this so much. This guy has been impacted, like he's had some bad things happen to him. Why are you thinking about pain? Why are you thinking about bad things? And I personally, like, no offense to anyone that's thinking that, but I personally think it's because you're just not exposed to the fact that if you look closely within yourself, you are always looking at a way out of suffering. Even when you're trying to be happy, you're looking for relief rather than happiness. And that is something that I've realized. All the times you've ever been annoyed, you don't actually like that, right? Like, that's you suffering. You're trying to find a way out of that. That's what I mean by suffering. Anytime that people don't perform up to what you expected of them, that's you suffering. And that's what I mean by that. So I basically asked myself, why am I enjoying when I haven't figured out a way out yet? And so there's this serious, silent, probably not as silent as I would like it to be, but this observation of just trying to collect data on myself, trying to understand myself in the world. And once I understand that, I think we'll be good. Understanding first, then everything else second.